Teachers of Reddit. What experiences have you had with dumb parents? Story 1. My mother is a K-12 teacher for a charter school that does homeschooling with a teacher checking in and reviewing things about once a week. It's meant for students who have difficulty in the public school system, which can range from dropouts to super smart kids to non-English speakers, and parents who don't have the time to do full homeschool. I used to help with grading the math and science stuff, so I have tons of stories. One parent during the school year kept taking her daughter on trips to different countries, and then asking my mother to extend her work. We're talking about 5 or 6 trips during the year. That would be fine if it was laid out at the start of the school year, and they could schedule accordingly. But this parent would make these trips spontaneously, like, in a few days, we're going to Russia. So she can't meet you next week like we scheduled 2 days ago. Another parent really pissed off my mother. 2 kids, brothers, both seniors, almost done with high school. All that was left was some sort of state testing done in a classroom. One brother shows up, the other isn't there. My mom, proctored the exam, asks where his brother is. He replies, he didn't feel like coming. She tells him that this is all he needs to graduate, so text him and get him to come here. He doesn't show. Halfway through the test, the kid's mother storms in the door, yelling at my own mother, telling her off for making her son feel ashamed and humiliated. She flips a table over, no joke, grabs her son that's there, who looked like he wanted to die, keep in mind he's a senior, like 17 years old or so, and storms out the door. Both brothers failed to get their high school degree, as neither had completed the state test. The crazy mom then writes a scathing email to my mother's supervisor, talking about how she'd been lying to her, disregarding her problems in her children's education, and attempting to sabotage their chance at graduation. That's crazy, man. I feel for your mom. It must be frustrating to be in that situation. The mom of the 2 boys, but the K and Karen. Story 2. I don't want to call any parents dumb because in my experience, they're mostly doing the best they can for their kids, even if that best isn't what we'd hope for. However, I did have a student who came to my student teaching classroom 2 grades below reading level, and similarly behind in other subjects. She really wanted to learn, but she had some cognitive issues that didn't qualify her for special ed, but meant that she required a lot of time and personal attention to learn well. For that entire school year, I worked individually with her before and after school, while she was waiting for the bus or after she'd been dropped off, and often during her recess in art or gym or library, what she asked me to do because she wanted to learn and wanted one-on-one attention. She improved markedly in reading and in writing, which is what we were concentrating on. She wasn't caught up at the end of the year, but she was a hell of a lot closer. She failed the year, but because she had a speech issue, her parents could decide to send her to the next grade anyway. I tried to convince her parents that she should be held back a year, because with another year of intensive help, which I was going to find a way to secure for her, I thought that she could be close to or on grade level and could possibly keep up with the other students after that. They refused because they didn't want the other students to make fun of her. I have no idea what happened after that because I moved to another state, but I bet it wasn't good. Given how crappy kids can be to other kids, I can't say that was bad reasoning, but I can say you were a hero to that kid. Don't forget that. Story 3. I substituted in a high school for 5 months to finish off the year for a teacher who was on maternity leave, so I had a student who was a senior who never did any homework, accounted for 35% of the total grade. I would constantly send emails to the parents, who always responded that they deal with it, spoke with the parents at conferences, and kept the admins in the loop. 1 week before the finals, I sent the notice home that she needed to get a 97% in the final to pass the class and get the credit she needed for graduation. And I even gave her one more chance to turn in past homework for 50% credit. Fast forward to the final, she barely gets a passing grade and therefore can't get the credits, can't graduate, can't enlist in the Air Force like she'd intended. The parents come into the office of the school screaming at everyone that they had no clue it would come to this. When we all sat down in an office with a guidance counselor, principal, department head, and myself, I reviewed the several notices with them, explained that she had multiple opportunities to gain credit, etc., but refused to do anything. Turns out, the wife was hiding the emails and information from her husband and wanted her daughter to fail so she wouldn't join the Air Force and move away from home. Last I heard from the situation, they're not together. The daughter's working at Lowe's, she never finished high school, and has 2 kids and multiple arrests for selling the bad stuff. There's a reason I didn't want to pursue teaching as a career after that. Yo, that is messed up. I can't seem to grasp how she could be so selfish that she'd risk the future of her kid just because she doesn't want her to leave. That's a big fat F in my books. Story 4. Just before Christmas break, I had the students hand in a paper. One of the students was missing a page, so I pulled out the contact sheet that I had the student fill out at the beginning of the year and gave a call. The student's father picked up the line, said, "Thanks for calling. We'll definitely get that extra page for you." The next day, the student's mother comes storming into the classroom. She happens to be an education assistant at the school. She demands to know where I got that number. I said that her son had put it on the contact sheet. Apparently, the parents are separated. She proceeded to tell me that I had no right to call that number, that when there is a problem with their son, only she has the right to know. I told her thanks, that's good to know. That's when she dropped this bombshell. If he hands something in that is incomplete, you fail him. You got that? Fail. And she walked out of the classroom. This is coming from a person who's supposed to help children succeed.
Hey, also, if you didn't know yet, me and a couple of my friends just launched Rufus rugs. Premium, custom, hand-tufted rugs. Maybe you're just a fan of Naruto and want to show it off. Or maybe you just love Pokemon and want bus toys on display for everyone. Either way, we can make almost anything. So hit the first link in the description to learn more.
Story 5. I taught English in Colombia for a summer and had some pretty interesting interactions. One particular set of parents insisted that their son was a brilliant genius who didn't need to study. He rarely came to class and therefore could barely speak any English, while the rest of his classmates could speak full basic sentences. I emailed his parents my concerns for his apparent lack of motivation. They told me that he could speak perfect English and didn't need to come to class, so they let him skip. Finally, parent and instructor conference time came and I asked him to bring their son. I asked him in English, "How's English class coming along?" He stared blankly and just started crying. I hate to say I told you so. I told the parents simply that the school required a passing grade from my class in order for their son to advance to the next grade. They were incredibly defensive, saying he was just nervous and such at first, but it's pretty hard to BS your way through a foreign language and get away with it. They eventually started forcing him to come to class, and he eventually barely passed. What bad parenting. I can only imagine how else they spoil their kid. Maybe you should have taught the parents they could learn a thing or two. Story 6. It was a 4-day weekend. I come back on Monday to 50 emails. Generally, we have 10 to 15 in my group. My voicemail is 10 messages. I had not gotten a voicemail once in my entire time at my school. It was a parent flipping out that their student is failing, how stupid I was for not allowing their student to do the work, how ridiculous I was that I could not give her student another chance. Last email and voicemail was her husband apologizing because I'm not the teacher of the student. They just got confused with last names, I guess. Story 7. I work as an assistant at an art studio, and we have a 7-year-old with seizure syndrome. Except that I'm pretty sure she doesn't. I'm pretty sure she had one seizure once and her mom freaked out and had her diagnosed. Now, this little girl loved to terrorize her mother. She's told me that. She looked up at me with her big brown eyes and gigantic toothy smile and told me that she likes messing with her mom and making her angry because her mom is too protective and one of those helicopter parents. So this little girl just jerks her mom every which way, and it's hilarious because her mom is just like that. Overbearing, extremely protective, and really, really bossy. She'll tell the main teacher and I how to teach her daughter how to draw and how many colors to use, etc. But we don't have to retaliate or even say anything because her daughter does it for us. That little girl is fantastic. I love how satisfying the story is. If you don't want your mom to become bossy like that kid's mom, you better hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Now on to the next story. Story 8. I wouldn't call them dumb parents, but parents who are in denial about who their child actually is breaks my heart. For instance, we had a student who had an abundance of markers for autism and was in 6th grade. All the teachers in the students' team agreed they ought to tell the parents their concerns and suggest the student be tested so we could offer more resources for the student. The teacher who spoke with them was very polite, very kind in suggesting they try and figure out how best to help the student, and the mom literally screamed at her that nothing was wrong with her child, that she would never get the student tested. Her husband even tried to tell her that it wasn't a bad thing and that they should try and see if it would help, since his teachers who knew him thought it might. The mom started cussing out the teacher and stormed out. Story 9. My uncle was a teacher in a school for troubled kids for about 10 years for elementary. One day, a kid starts talking about how the plants and air are all over his house. My uncle, being a longtime surfer and product of the 70s, didn't say anything at first. And during a parent-teacher conference, the parents are just being flat out uncooperative. "It ain't my son's fault. You failed him. That's on you. He does his homework. I see him." "Ma'am, he needs more focus." "Nah, you don't know what you're talking about. How'd you even be a teacher when you don't know crap?" "My uncle, I know you're cultivating the same home where your son lives." Boom. He said she got a look on her face that was just priceless, like she crapped her pants. Then he told her, "Get rid of the plants today and sit down with your son and help him with his work, or else." That's crazy how she goes on attacking your uncle then gets owned. Well played. Instant Uno reverse card. I wish we all could have seen her face. Story 10. Taught college, so my story is nice. Had a student failing horribly. Less than 10%, but would not drop. Whatever, not my dime, not my problem. Anyway, grades come in and I guess his mother has his password to his account, or perhaps he just told her his grade. F, obviously. and I get an angry email insisting that there's no way he could have failed pre-calculus, because my god, his father is an engineer and the student wants to be an engineer and he just has to be good at math. The best part is, when you turn 18 and go to college, you're treated as an adult, even if you don't act like one. And there's a little box you can check that says, "Allow my parents to see my records." Most kids don't check it, and by law I'm not allowed to release any records to anyone, even parents. So I politely informed her that her son is considered an adult and I was not allowed to release any records and that she would have to contact him. Of course, this prompted a long, "I'm going to get you fired" email that I forwarded to my dean, who came to my office for a long laugh. I actually feel pretty bad for the kid. Having a helicopter mom like that at that age will do him no favors. Story 11. My mom teaches 1st through 12th grade. Generally, each year she'll take on about 25 to 28 students, and they can be all over the place as far as years go. They aren't necessarily problem students, just students who don't fit well in a public school. She commonly gets people who know English as a second language, which gives them trouble in school. She gets a few crazy intelligent kids who are a year or two ahead of their class, usually because they had excellent homeschooling as a kid, but they're outpacing the scholastic knowledge of the parents. And she gets students that have problems at home with either parents not caring, the alcohol and other things in the family, or already have a child. It runs the gamut. Mind you, this school was a bit different. One problem she ran into constantly was that ultimately the parents had control in their child's education. While she would meet up with each student regularly, the brunt of their education fell on the parents' shoulders. Teachers for the school were required to be flexible and go with the parents' wishes. There were no core textbooks, no core curriculum, everything was arranged between the parent and the teacher. This flexibility, while appealing to parents and sometimes successful, often screwed over a lot of the kids in their education. One parent had their child's curriculum changed about 3 times during the year, with each curriculum requiring a new set of books. She completely disregarded the tried and proven curriculum used by past students in favor of whatever she could dig up on Google. Parents who wanted their kids to learn music wanted to use the student funds. Each student had an allowance of sorts handled by the teacher to spend on school supplies, to purchase guitars or keyboards rather than more useful things such as textbooks. It was always a hassle at the end of the year too, as it was all school property, but many of the parents thought, "I'm paying for the education, therefore I own it." So my mother would have to argue with them to get the stuff back, or if she wasn't able to check it into the school, the parents would be fined, and many could not afford the fine for a brand new guitar. There were a heck of a lot of weird quirks. One pair of parents would hang up mid-phone call if they weren't sure how to answer a question. Another often would schedule to drive her child to meet with my mother at a library, but then not show. She would then request that evening via phone that my mother drive to her house the next morning or something ridiculous like that. We're talking an hour-long drive minimum. Another was very insistent that her daughter stay in this dance troupe, which would spend 4 to 6 hours a day on dance-related stuff. Nothing wrong with ambition, and she loved to dance, but the girl was on path to fail out of high school, and she only stayed in the troupe because her mother made her. Another single parent reassured her kids that it was alright if they didn't pass high school. They could live off of welfare too. Not knocking anyone who's on welfare, but to actively encourage choosing welfare over a high school diploma is sick in my opinion. My mom put up with these stupid shenanigans. Most of these students, however quirky or off-kilter their parents were, would wind up with a high school diploma or at least a GED. She said the worst situations were when the parents just plain didn't care about their kids. I'm feeding him and clothing him and paying for his school, and I'm a good parent. No emotional support or encouragement or real parenting. Most of the kids would make it at least halfway through high school before deciding that a degree really doesn't matter much. Those cases tore her up, as they would almost always drop out in their junior or senior year, and she couldn't convince them to keep on trying. This is crazy. The amount of insanity teachers receive is off the charts. Shout out to all the teachers out there. Story 12. I had a 5th grader blow up on me, shouting and screaming in the hallway. This was sort of the final straw for him. He had a long history of verbal abuse of staff in the school, and he was suspended for 6 days. State law allows the parents to have an informal meeting with the teacher and the principal of the school. Mom and Dad come into this meeting with myself, the principal, and the guidance counselor. Principal introduces everyone. Mom interrupts, saying she has a major concern that needs to be addressed immediately. She accused the principal of being an imposter and demanded that everyone in the room take out their driver's licenses to prove that we are who we say we are. We all refused, and she battled about this for 10 or so minutes. Over the course of the next 45 minutes, she ranted about how the principal was an imposter, that this imposter principal, myself, and the superintendent were involved in a conspiracy to remove her son from the school. Oh, wow. Okay, that's the weirdest thing I've ever heard. At this point, all I can say about the kid and mom is genetics. Story 13. Oh Lordy, where to start? I teach 11th grade. Number 1, sat in an IEP special ed meeting. The parents wanted all of these accommodations for the student, even though we kept bringing up his daily habit. The accommodations still got in the plan with a promise from him to cut back. 2. Parents asking us how to parent their child. He gets upset when I take his Xbox. 3. A kid kept forgetting his backpack. I asked him if he had his cell phone or shoes. Obviously he did, so I told him to put those items in his backpack when he gets home. His mom thought I was a genius. 4. One parent was exasperated that their child with ADHD wasn't doing college-level work. 5. 2 minutes into a phone conference with a mom, she compared her son with her other kids and lamented that her son wasn't as good at school as they were. 6. This is the saddest. I have a deaf student. On parent-teacher night, the student's parents come to my class with her. I quickly deduced that the mom and the dad do not know sign language. We talked about her progress and her wanting to go into medicine. I had to convince the dad she was capable. He kept talking her down and demanding she speak. This is a majority of my parent interactions. I would say 1/3 are normal but yield no change. Story 14. Had 2 girls in my English class who obviously hated each other. They would exchange glares, talk a little too loudly about each other while in the same vicinity, etc. I talked to them about it separately, and they both responded with, "I hate that stupid bee." Notified admin of the situation, called parents. Next day, they decided to fight it out in class. After breaking it up, I find out that girl number 1 was accusing the other girl of wearing butt pads to make her butt look better. After discussing it with her parents, girl number 1's mom told her that only wear butt pads, and that she should do something about it. The butt pad girl number 2, swore she wasn't wearing butt pads, that it was all natural. After telling her parents about it, they advised her to mess up that girl for talking smack. And that's how you end up with a fight in class over butt pads instigated by parents. Story 15. My mom teaches early childhood education, basically 5 to 6-year-olds. One of them had major signs of autism. My mom said it seemed like it, and after reading several books on the subject, I thought so too. This also helped spawn my idea for an autism-friendly restaurant, but we'll talk about that later. Primarily, he had the basic signs such as a lack of imagination, social skills, and he never ate anything other than a PB&J sandwich. He would scream if offered otherwise. He also always had to be on a schedule. Since I walked to that school from my school, I always played with him. We would go to the unused library and play piano. I taught him to play songs like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. He loved it. He would tell me he loved piano, but decided to let his parents know. They denied it all. So my mom decided to bring the school in and had him observed. Sure enough, the psychologist agreed with us. He's in 1st grade now. It's my most heartwarming memory I have. I saw him at Walmart, and he took me to the toys section. Found one of those demo pianos, and played Mary Had a Little Lamb. His parents bought him a toy piano and showed him how to read the music. He's getting treatment now. I'm crying while writing this. I miss you, little bro. As for my idea, it'd just be a colorful restaurant. Simple food, friendly people, same waitresses, etc. Hey, the restaurant idea would be cool. Also, I'd love to be invited if there was PB&J. Story 16. Not a direct interaction with the parents, but I feel it fits. I coordinate an internship program. I caught one of the students stealing. It wasn't a lot, a few packs of stride gum, but something like that makes us look bad to the employer and could have jeopardized the entire program. I explain everything to the school administration, and the student gets suspended for 3 days. When he returns, he apologizes to me. I do a whole spiel that what he did was serious, and on a real job if you're caught stealing, there are no second chances. And I had to promise the manager I'd watch him like a hawk for the rest of the year. To lighten the mood up a bit, I asked him what he did over the 3 days of being suspended. His mom had taken him to the mall, bought him new headphones, a few shirts from Hollister and Abercrombie, and a new PS3 game, which he played all the time he was suspended for stealing. If you've made it this far, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did and still have time, make sure to check out What Was the Worst Case of Special Snowflake Syndrome? I could not believe Story 4. See you there.